Howdy, mate. I'm Sean, and I, with my sis Shahnan, host Sisters Soiree, your very own film and TV review podcast. Today, we're back with another fun episode where we dive headfirst into reviewing a much-awaited watch. It's been written and directed by famous actor John Krasinski and is the sequel of a critically acclaimed movie. I think after listening to all of this, and of course reading the title, you won't be needing much help figuring out It's a Quiet Place 2. It was recently released in theaters, and we thought of taking it upon ourselves to give you its unbiased review. But if you haven't watched the first part, let me give you a little context about it and tell you what we thought. The first movie's plot revolved around the Abbott family trying to survive some unusual creatures who could only catch you if you made some noise. This was a plot that captivated billions of people around the globe. It was very well written and had excellent direction as well. All of the actors played their parts to perfection. The tension and thrill kept you in such suspense that you couldn't blink. The plot contained so many elements where the struggle built to the point of no return, which made it all the more exhilarating. It had its faults, of course, but they could be easily overlooked due to its many qualities. Now, you can understand why we were so excited for its sequel, especially since it got delayed so many times due to the pandemic. But did it live up to our expectations? Let's find out. A Quiet Place 2 begins with a little origin story with the Abbots enjoying their son's basketball game when they see a flaming ball in the sky. Everyone runs towards their cars, and while the Abbott family tries to drive away, these huge blind creatures hunt people down. This lets us in on the secret of how these things arrived on the planet and how people learned to subsist around them. This was a nice move that most sequels don't care about at all. After that, it picked up right where the last movie had left off, with the family having figured out how they could kill those aliens. After that, I'd thought the pace would be quite fast, considering it was only an hour-and-a-half long movie. Well, it couldn't have been slower, since the filmmakers had rather focused on showing us the bond between the Abbots, which they achieved quite amazingly. I loved to see them struggle as a family and get over all the misunderstandings that were keeping them apart in the previous movie. All the emotional scenes were well written and directed, for which John Krasinski should be applauded. I am telling you, if the movie revolved around just a dysfunctional family, this would have been my favorite one of the year. But it wasn't. It was supposed to be a horrifying thriller, and that was a job it couldn't do very well. And I'll tell you why. First of all, the plot didn't really advance at all. I thought after knowing how to kill the creatures, the Abbots would go on a killing spree to end it once and for all. But instead, they still wanted to hide and protect themselves, which is understandable, but is it scary enough to hold us for both films? You can judge for yourself. I mean, sure, there were a few jump scares every now and then, with some characters going MIA and some plans getting off course. But even when the characters would be face to face with danger, they'd play some high-frequency noise and kill it. I felt the thrill and tension never built much compared to the way it did in the first film. And even when it did, it was cut short due to the time crunch they were on. The struggle, too, was way less than the first movie, which consisted of so many hypnotic sequences, like the time when one of the characters had to give birth while the creature was just a few meters away. Think how riveting and horrifying that must be to watch. Unfortunately, A Quiet Place 2 had no moments as engrossing or even in the ballpark of this. It became so predictable that by the second half, which wasn't too far in, I almost fell asleep while watching it. The only thing that kept me going was Millicent Simmons and Emily Blunt's acting. Millicent Simmons played a deaf 17-year-old who has a rebellious and outgoing side, which, as you can imagine, aren't the best qualities during an alien invasion. She usually spews huge trouble for herself and the family in both films, but redeems herself by coming out on top as the bravest and most daring of them all. After the death of her father at the end of the first film, Regan really matured from the beginning of the second one and became a young woman capable of making her own decisions by the end of it. She became capable of protecting herself, her family, and countless others. All of this couldn't have happened without Millicent Simmons' expressive acting. She didn't say much throughout the entire movie, but she didn't need to. If only the plotline had supported her enough to let her character reach her full potential. Because I know Millicent could have given us a lot more than she was allowed to. Hey Shannon, care to let us in on your school of thought about A Quiet Place 2?
I sure do. I would just like to say that whenever the sequel of a blockbuster movie comes out, it's usually nowhere near the level of the first one because the filmmakers overdo things. They try too hard to meet the expectations and the movie in turn becomes a huge disaster. We've seen this happen with the Predator and Alien sequels. So I'm glad that John Krasinski didn't head down that road and instead kept it simple. The biggest problem with A Quiet Place 2 was that it got too simple to hold us as an audience. I honestly liked the origin story at the beginning of the movie way better than the rest of the film. It was so enthralling to see everyone trying to figure out how these things operated and how they could protect themselves. There was this element of surprise for the characters which got me excited much more than the rest of the film did. I really feel a prequel would have been much better to watch. I agree with you that the characters didn't reach their potential and nor did the plot. If they ever decided to make a third part, you could honestly just skip the second one because nothing really happened and that's why it felt like a filler which was supposed to give the characters a chance to grow a little before the plot progressed. The sad part is that it never moved forward from the filler.
I feel what you're saying and think that the story didn't reach any exciting conclusion, which might have given rise to a third installment. It isn't as bad as it could have been, but it's definitely not as good as the first one. But what it boils down to is, should the audience give it their time?
I think because it's not that long, it could make up for a somewhat enjoyable watch. But don't get your hopes up thinking you'll have a blast. I made that mistake and was, well, disappointed. What would you recommend, Sean?
I'd say if you want to watch it, you shouldn't waste money and go to cinema halls, but rather wait till it's available on some streaming service and try it out there. Here you go. We've reviewed A Quiet Place 2 and given you our insight on the flick. We'll be back with another review soon. Hope you enjoyed this episode and will share it with family and friends. Shahnan and I are signing off for now until we meet again.
Have a great week. Bye.